Hi everyone, my name's Jess, and I'm here sharing with you my thoughts and reflections on Unit 2 from Human Communications. And Unit 2, at the beginning, when we had class facilitations, it explained the importance of written communication, nonverbal communication and its cues, and everything like that. And it also had the rules of language, the functions of nonverbal communication. So, Unit 1 explained verbal communication and how it's important to get clear information from the sender to the receiver. But Unit 2 is basically like written and nonverbal communication. So, to start off, language is governed by rules. The rules of language include phonology, denotation, semantics, syntactics, and pragmatics. Um, so, phonology is a study of sound, talking on the phone or, something like that. And denotation is a literal meaning. So, an example would be a dictionary definition, so the actual meaning. Semantics is the study of meaning, so what a word or something means. Syntactics is the arrangement of words or phrases to create well formed sentences. Um, and pragmatics is how to use language appropriately based on the language and context that is being used. So, using these can result in more effective communication as well. Also, we talked about written communication and the five W's. So, it would be what, who, when and where, why, how. All of those have like a point with nonverbal communication because it's who your audience is, the time and place, what you're trying to get across, what it means, what you're trying to say. So if you're writing something to someone, say an email or text message, say to a professor, you don't want to just say, hey, smiley face. You want to get that message across professionally. You want to say what you're trying to say clearly and effectively so there's no miscommunication. Say it nice and clear because you're not actually speaking with the person one on one. You're not speaking with them so they can't get an actual perception of what you're trying to say. You have to write it clearly. So we also talked about that. We also focus on nonverbal communication and the cues in place of verbal communication. So, the definition of nonverbal communication is the unintentional and intentional human messages and responses without the use of words. The functions of nonverbal communication include reinforcement, negation, substitution, accentuation, regulation, and repeat. So, reinforcement occurs when verbal and nonverbal messages are in sync and complement one another. Negation is when nonverbal and verbal messages have conflict with one another. And negation is when nonverbal and verbal messages contradict one another. Um, Substitution is using action instead of words. So, say if you walked into a coffee shop and you said, and someone asked, how many sugars would you like? You can say, which means two. Um, so that could be in place of substitution. Uh, Accentuation is using nonverbal cues to emphasize verbal messages. So if you said OMG, like oh my gosh, raising your eyebrows while you say it, like that's kind of emphasizing your emotions or what you're trying to say. Regulation is when you use nonverbal cues to help manage, facilitate, and control communication. And finally, repeating is um, using nonverbal communication along with verbal. So back to the coffee shop example, if someone said, how many sugars would you like in your coffee? Two. So two, your verbal and nonverbal cues. So it's kind of repeating one another because you're doing both. Um, so Unit 2, I interviewed my floor mate Kayla, who is a nurse practitioner at St. Luke's. She, um, I chose to interview her, and I asked her my main research question, which was, when explaining things like terminal illness to patients, what kind of nonverbal communication what must you use in order to make them feel most comfortable and relaxed? So I branched off this question into different questions to kind of get a better understanding of nonverbal communication and how she uses nonverbal cues on in her workplace in the medical field. So I basically focus more on the nonverbal communication part within my interview. And so I asked questions like, what do you do if a patient's sad? If they are diagnosed with a terminal illness, how do you comfort them using nonverbal communication? She would say, a hug, a rub on the shoulder makes them feel more relaxed and comfortable and assured that everything will be okay. So that was an important part. Another important part was I asked how her head nurses use nonverbal communication and how she observes it. So she also said she observes the head nurses rubbing the patient on the shoulder, seeing if they're okay, telling how patients um, the expression on their face, what she can do to help them. So they have a better she has a better idea of what the patients need. Finally, also with Unit 2, our movie was Southside with You, which was about Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, the past president and first lady, and it we had to develop connections with the movie, how it related to this unit, and the movie was about how they met and how they got to how they were today, married. So it was a very good movie. The difference between this movie and Unit 1 was that the King's speech was based more off verbal communication because of his stutter, how to get his message across clearly, because the effects of nonverbal communication, the how to get things across clearly is be clear, be authentic, be encouraging, and be appropriate. So that was kind of be clear with using verbal communication. So, and this movie, Southside with You, was more about the meanings of words and how they relate with how you should talk to one another, to how to get the message across clearly as well. Although the first movie was about verbal, and so is this one, but this one's more about the meanings rather than the King's speech is more he had a stutter, so it was hard to understand. So overall, the movie was well played and it gave great connections with this unit and facilitations with Unit 2. So I definitely recommend this movie to others. And thank you. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to my reflection on Unit 2 with the interview, the movie, and the explanation of the facilitations and communications in class. This unit was very interesting, learning about nonverbal cues and communications and the effects of language and the meanings. Thank you so much for listening. That is my reflection. Goodbye.